Coming up, the evolution of a universal rock standard. It was rescued from obscurity by a 17-year-old future icon who happened to see a live performance of the song while watching TV in a hotel room in London. She pointed at the TV and said, "I'm going to do that song someday." It went from being a non-hit to one of the biggest #1 hits ever. It's an amazing story of perseverance and destiny. Coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you know the names of every member of the Brat Pack by heart, you're going to dig this channel, music nostalgia all the time. We interview the great artists of the rock era, and you never know what's in store from day to day. So make sure that you subscribe right below so you don't miss out. Check the box and everything, and check out our exclusive content on Patreon to help us keep it a daily channel. So it's time for another edition of our series, The New Standards. This is a show that takes an in-depth look into songs that transcend genre, decade, and fads. Songs that are monumental touchstones in our culture and society. Previous episodes, we've covered Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, and Hotel California by Eagles.
And the cat's in the cradle and a silver spoon.
But today, we're going to put another dime in the jukebox and celebrate one of the biggest #1 hits of the 80s, I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. This is my pick for a new standard. It's just a song that, as a little kid, it grabbed me by the throat and never let me go. I remember going to a Pizza Hut as a little kid, and I would always beg my dad for dimes to play in the jukebox. They had one of those kind of square jukeboxes. And I remember every time I would get a dime for about a year, I always played I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. It was one of those songs, it was like my window to the world of music. Now, by the time Joan Jett assembled her backup band and re-recorded her massive breakout hit in 1981, she was already a music icon. I mean, at 15, Joan co-fronted the Runaways, one of the first all-female rock bands, and established a bad reputation for being an unabashed rebel, determined to crush the status quo.
I don't give a damn for my reputation.
Joan was rejected by record labels 23 times. Yeah, you heard me right, 23 times. Before taking the do-it-yourself approach and earned the titles Queen of Rock and Roll and Godmother of Punk.
Never said I wanted to improve my station.
In 1976, Joni, as she's affectionately called, she was in the United Kingdom during a European leg of touring with the Runaways. Kicking it in her London hotel room to pass the time, she watched an episode of the TV series Arrows, which was a show formatted for teens back in the 70s featuring live music performances. The series was named after the London-based band The Arrows, and on that particular episode, the Arrows performed their single, I Love Rock and Roll. And Joan was instantly captivated. She said the song screamed hit to her. Joan expressed interest in recording her own version to the Runaways manager, Kim Fowley. She just knew it was going to be a hit. She made up her mind right then and there. She bought a copy of the 45 and excitedly presented the track to her bandmates as something for the Runaways to record. But the other 4 musicians of the group, consisting of Sandy West, Cherie Currie, and Lita Ford, and also Jackie Fox, they spurned the song. Joan revealed that the main reason that the Runaways declined to record I Love Rock and Roll was because they had already recorded a cover of Lou Reed's Rock and Roll. So the idea of recording another song with rock and roll in the title would sound repetitive to everybody, including Joan's bandmates. The reason for passing on the song seemed, rational to Joan, so she put her passion for I Love Rock and Roll on the back burner. As Tom Petty so profoundly declared, "The waiting is the hardest part." We all know that to be true. And in this instance, waiting to act on her instincts to record I Love Rock and Roll would indeed prove to be well worth the wait for Joan Jett. I Love Rock and Roll, that was written by Arrow's lead singer Alan Merrill. Merrill wrote the music and the lyrics, but he did give Arrow's guitarist Jake Hooker co-writing credit to help pay off a debt Merrill owed his bandmate for plane tickets from London to Tokyo that Hooker paid for with funds that he received from his mother. The plane tickets helped Merrill fly to Tokyo to do some touring with his previous outfit called Vodka Collins that had generated a Flickr attraction in Japan. Merrill promised Hooker that he would always list him in the songwriting credits for I Love Rock and Roll if anything ever happened with the song. And it would be the best investment that Jake Hooker or anyone could ever make. Merrill and the rest of the Arrows began collaborating with the illustrious British hitmaker Mickie Most. Mickey instructed Merrill to come up with a rousing, anthemic song that was simple, maybe 3 chords at the most, something in the vein of Eddie Cochran's Summertime Blues or the Troggs' Wild Thing. With that criteria in mind, though, Merrill was inspired to write I Love Rock and Roll. This was in the summer of '74. After having what he called a knee-jerk reaction when he heard It's Only Rock and Roll by the Rolling Stones on the radio. When he listened to the Rolling Stones top 10 hit, he remembered feeling a little disgruntled by Jagger's chorus and thinking, what do you mean it's only rock and roll, but I like it? I love rock and roll. That emphatic statement got the ball rolling, as it would. Merrill's composition began with the infectious chorus that we all know so well. The lyrics sounded like a certain hit song to Merrill. His idea was to create a song within a song, so to speak, a song separate from the verses. The profound chorus would project loudly from a jukebox, with kids in a disco flirting with each other on the dance floor and instantly singing the song together. It was precisely what Mickie Most had asked for. Now, from the outset, it seemed like I Love Rock and Roll had what it took to be a runaway hit. The navigation in the studio by Mickie Most as the producer of the track alone gave the song instant cachet. Mickie, of course, instrumental in the crafting of a long list of hit singles by everybody from Herman's Hermits to Donovan, Lulu, Hot Chocolate, and Suzi Quatro, among many, many others. The Arrows' original was surprisingly released, though, as a B-side. This is because Mickie preferred the ballad to be the A-side. And Mickey's wife, Christina Most, encouraged her husband to flip the sides, but the song was the victim of really bad timing, and it failed to catch on. And actually, I Love Rock and Roll, it was a B-side 2 different times. More on that coming up. This episode of Professor of Rock is presented by BUBS Naturals, the makers of collagen and MCT Oil Powder that is backed by scientific research and discovery. Now, the product was created while adhering to very high standards to help all of us achieve a longer, fuller life. The key is to get started, and that requires getting the BUBS Naturals product to set up your daily regimen. Now, I put mine together, and I've stayed really consistent with the regimen. In just a few weeks, I've seen improved energy, improved focus, and actually relief of the stomach issues I've struggled with for decades. We've partnered with BUBS Naturals to give the Professor of Rock community a 20% discount on all products. The link in the description below will route you to a dedicated landing page that was built exclusively for Professor of Rock viewers. No matter what age we are, we have the same pursuit, so take advantage of the benefits that BUBS Naturals will provide by clicking on the link, exploring the products, and getting what you need to set and follow a new plan to feel great and to do good. Okay, so back to the story. At the time of the release of the Arrows' I Love Rock and Roll, there was a newspaper strike in the UK, so new songs were not getting any exposure in the papers. And that was a big deal back then. The band was also in a bitter feud with their record label. Imagine that. Those factors actually exiled the song to obscurity that lasted more than 5 years. Outside of the performance on the telly that, Joan happened to catch, The Arrows' original was largely overlooked, and it stalled in the outer reaches of the UK singles chart as a B-side. Labeled as a glam rock band, the Arrows' highest-reaching chart hit was Touch Too Much in 1974, which went to number 2 in the South African charts and remained in the top 20 in that country for about 15 weeks. The band's only US TV appearance was on Don Kirshner's rock concert in February of 1975. On that late night show, the Arrows played their UK hits Touch Too Much and Toughen Up. It took years to come to fruition, but just as he imagined, Alan Merrill's anthemic chorus was destined for eternal fame in pop culture. I Love Rock and Roll put another dime in the jukebox, baby. That chorus was made for someone like me, and probably for you. I do love rock and roll, and I happen to love the jukebox. What a cool invention. The jukebox, that wonderful, partially automated hit machine evolved from the nickel in the slot phonograph that was invented by William Arnold and Louis Glass in 1890. Actually, in 1928, the piano manufacturer Justus Seeberg combined an electrostatic loudspeaker with a Thomas Edison invented record player that was operated by coins. The term jukebox was spawned by the usage of juke joint, which was a name for rural dance and gambling clubs in the late 30s and 40s in southeastern America. Jukeboxes became extremely popular in the 40s and the 50s as one of the primary ways to listen to your favorite song, especially with teenagers. Actually, by 1945, most of the records manufactured in America were inserted into jukeboxes, and the machines became quite profitable for restaurants and malt shops and bars. Jukeboxes were so prevalent at that time, Billboard magazine published a chart that solely measured jukebox play of a song in the 50s. They even incorporated the data into the formula that determined the most popular songs for their Hot 100 survey. And although the use of jukeboxes declined significantly by the 60s, they maintained a cool novelty appeal, like a piece of retro art or a classic black and white movie. Period pieces depicting the 40s and 50s often used a jukebox in the set to really transport us to an age of innocence and wonder. I remember when I interviewed Rick Springfield, he had the coolest jukebox, and I got one right after that. Actually, I have 3 jukeboxes now, one from the 50s and the 70s and the 80s. Joan Jett got her chance to do her own interpretation of I Love Rock and Roll in 1979. Her initial stab at the song was on a recording with former Sex Pistols member Steve Jonesy Jones and Paul Cookie Cook. That version was released on vinyl on the Vertigo Records label. Once again, I Love Rock and Roll is relegated to the B-side, chosen to be incidental to the single You Don't Owe Me. After an exhaustive search for players to comprise her backup band, the Blackhearts, in 1981, re-recorded I Love Rock and Roll as the title track and lead single for her second solo album. The timing was finally ideal for Alan Merrill's track to flourish. After stalwart manager Kenny Laguna landed Joan a solo deal with Boardwalk Records, which benefited from being a subsidiary of the major label Polygram Records. Yet I have to say, in my opinion, Kenny Laguna is a shining example of what an artist manager should be. Zealously and vigilantly working to further the artist's interest no matter how impossible that it may seem. Laguna believed so valiantly in Joan, he even put up his own money to underwrite the making of her first solo album. Talked to so many people about why some artists flourish and some don't, and really the difference between having a successful career and being tossed by the wayside is having dedicated management. And Laguna was exactly what Joan needed to be successful. Now, the new and ultimately definitive version by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts featured the iconic guitar licks delivered by the lead guitarist of the Blackhearts, Mr. Ricky Byrd. Ricky, along with bassist Gary Ryan and drummer Lee Crystal, provided backing vocals for Joan on the track. Oh, so good. Ricky was a pivotal part of the Blackhearts for more than a decade and has an esteemed resume of stints with many of the all-time greats. There's The Who, Paul McCartney, Steve Miller, Jimmy Page, Alice Cooper, the Beach Boys, Bruce Springsteen as well. I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts was a brush fire smash, reaching number one in nearly every country that conducted a pop music chart around the world. It sat on top of the Billboard Hot 100 for 7 weeks, and it finished as the third biggest single in the year-end countdown for 1982. Let's go back to the top 5 singles of 1982. At the end of the year, the chart looked like this. At number 1, you had Physical by the late Olivia Newton-John. Number 2, Survivor's theme from Rocky III, Eye of the Tiger. I Love Rock and Roll, of course, at number 3 by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Ebony and Ivory by the superstar duo of Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney was at number 4.
Ebony and Ivory.
And at number 5 was Centerfold by the Jay Giles Band. Love the 80s. Thanks to Joan Jett, Jake Hooker was reimbursed for the airline ticket that he paid for out of the royalties he received as a co-writer of I Love Rock and Roll. In spite of the copious royalties, though, Hooker succumbed to personal demons and committed suicide in 2014. Alan Merrill, the author of the eventual pop phenomenon, he passed away in 2020 from complications brought on by the COVID virus. The single for I Love Rock and Roll was certified double platinum by the RIAA, representing the sale of more than 2 million units just for the single. The song was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. That happened in 2016. A year before that, in 2015, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In recognition of Joan's trailblazing impact in her dynamic career, this spanned more than 40 years at that point.
I was really going to try not to cry and be tough, but that's a little overwhelming there. Thank you.
Besides Joan Jett and the Blackhearts' renowned staple, I Love Rock and Roll has been remade by a variety of artists from different genres. There's Britney Spears, AC Dixie,
Hear me singing, I love rock and roll. Putting up and down in the jukebox, baby.
LA Guns,
Next we were moving on. She was with me, yeah, me.
and the Japanese rock band L'Arc-en-Ciel. And of course, you can't forget Weird Al's parody, I Love Rocky Road.
I know what I need, baby. I love Rocky Road.
And by the time Joan Jett and the Blackhearts recorded I Love Rock and Roll in 81 and it was released, a dime would not buy you a play on a jukebox. Actually, in my little small town it did, but in most cities it didn't. It was at least a quarter in the 80s, and the more modern machines that came later on as years went by only accepted paper currency. Now, in spite of the depreciated value of a dime, Joan did stay true to the original Alan Merrill lyric. Put another dime in the jukebox, baby, because it just sounded so good. I mean, it didn't make sense to mess with pop perfection. A dime may not buy much these days, but its placement in that song is proven invaluable to the creation of one of the true standards of the rock and roll era. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about this amazing song, I Love Rock and Roll, and Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. What do you remember about jukeboxes when you went to restaurants or arcades or whatever? What was the first song you played on a jukebox when you went in? I want to have a great discussion about this. I miss that so much. My kids, of course, know what it is because I have some jukeboxes, and they've even said to me, I wish we had these. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you like this content, we do invite you to subscribe below. Make sure to let us know what you think of the content below. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friend.